to resign in mid-July. During a TV presentation, Castro attacked him and accused him of being on the brink of treason.
Finally, it would have been much better if the personality we so unselfishly entrusted with the presidency of the Republic would have begun to carry on a revolutionary policy. But his hesitations, his sluggishness, were beginning to bring about a loss of faith in our people, who were somewhat skeptical because they had been deceived repeatedly. But this time they had trust indeed. They were enthusiastic about us, but they were waiting for facts.
3 times previously, President Urrutia had tried to resign, but each time Castro had refused to accept it. This time he not only demanded Urrutia's resignation, but resigned himself, thus provoking a crisis and uncertainty among the people. The Revolutionary Trades Union Confederation called a general strike on the 23rd of July, demanding Castro's return to power. In a spectacular, well-attended show, Castro accepted. Some revolutionaries began to doubt the democratic character of the revolution.
Entonces rápidamente pues nosotros vimos como eso empezó a deteriorarse, a desorganizarse.
I saw how everything began to go wrong, get disorganized. I saw how they began to impose autocratically the schemes of a single party. They set up a single-party system, didn't they? Almost at the start of the revolutionary process, almost the moment they assumed power. It was a one-party dictatorship that really shocked me. Since, however, I still had all the wartime illusions and aspirations, I realized that many of the goals were being attained, although at the cost of great hardship and at times violence. It must be acknowledged that it was through violence that many of the first revolutionary goals were achieved.
Yo, como dije una cosa, tuve todavía un cierto aguante, ¿no?
As I have said before, I still had a certain ability to stand up to the things that offended my democratic principles and my own conscience.
The new Cuban president's name was Osvaldo Dorticos, former secretary to communist leader Juan Marinello. 23 years later, Dorticos committed suicide for reasons still not very clear. The habeas corpus right was suspended indefinitely, and the jails began to fill up with new political prisoners. Trials and shootings intensified, provoking international protests. But Castro's prestige was high, and protests were drowned out by the cries of "Long live Castro." Yet it wasn't until October 1959 that the first real crisis took place. Matos, here next to Castro entering Havana, asked to be replaced as military chief of Camagüey province in protest for what he called communist infiltration. Castro's answer was to accuse him of sedition and treason.
El pueblo cubano creyó, por las arengas que escuchó en la radio durante la madrugada del 22.
The Cuban people believed, on account of the harangues they listened to on the radio at dawn on the 21st of October, that an uprising had taken place in Camagüey. And certainly there was an uprising in Camagüey, but not ordered by me or carried out by men under my command, but by Castro's orders, because it was he who ordered a company of the Army's tactic forces that, even though under my command, was independently set up on the outskirts of the city, and Camagüey's police forces to raid the streets as a provocation. Had we answered the irresponsible and criminal challenge from Castro, the streets of Camagüey City would have been flooded by a river of blood. At least quite a few lives would have been lost, and that's what he wanted. A few dead, to be able to say, this Matos affair was a real uprising against the revolutionary power, against the central government, against the people's hopes represented by the Castro-led revolution.
Matos was sentenced to 20 years of imprisonment at the end of a trial which was an absolute farce. The following day, a former guerrilla member and former Air Force commander, Pedro Luis Diaz-Lanz, exiled in the United States, flew over Havana City, throwing leaflets and dropping a few small bombs. The Cuban government thought that Washington had begun to support the counter-revolution openly. In November, Che Guevara took charge of the National Bank and the process became even more radical. By the end of the same month, a Catholic Congress was held. The church that had supported the revolution up to that moment began to criticize it openly. Father Froilan Dominguez,